On a cold December day in 1958 in New York, a little over 8 years before the first Super Bowl took place, the New York Giants and Baltimore Colts spent the afternoon battling to see who would become the champion of the National Football League at the time. But little did they know that this game would be the very first in a long line of events that would lead us to the Super Bowl today. The Super Bowl's origins lie in the creation of the American Football League, or the AFL. Started by a group of businessmen, Lamar Hunt and Bud Adams would team up to do what many others had tried and failed to accomplish: create a viable alternative to the National Football League. After watching that championship game, Hunt and Adams decided that they wanted their own pro football franchises, but were frustrated by the NFL's unwillingness to expand. Rejected by NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle in their pursuit of the Chicago Cardinals, Hunt and Adams decided to create the American Football League in 1960. Hunt would take ownership of the Kansas City Texans, later changed to the Kansas City Chiefs, and Adams would take control of the Houston Oilers, which is today's Tennessee Titans. The AFL forged ahead as an alternative league, playing a more exciting brand of football, and so began a rivalry that would help propel pro football ahead of baseball as the most popular spectator sport in the country by the end of the decade. Like all other newcomers, the AFL wasn't taken seriously by most in the NFL. It predictably struggled at its onset, plagued by poor venues and fighting owners, but flashy football eventually garnered the interest of the American public, and the AFL quickly gained a foothold where other leagues had faltered. The new league began attracting top college talent, and soon the rival organizations were engrossed in bidding wars for rookies. But it was unheard of for players to be traded from one league to the other. That is, until a man named Wellington Mara, then the owner of the NFL's New York Giants, broke a gentleman's agreement between the NFL and AFL to not poach each other's players when he signed place kicker Pete Gogolak away from the AFL's Buffalo Bills. The moves opened the floodgates of a war that threatened to drown both leagues. The two leagues were already on a collision course that might well have ended in a merger, but it could have just as easily led to football's demise. Al Davis, then commissioner of the AFL, had no interest in a merger, and he wanted to bury the NFL. Thankfully for us, cooler heads prevailed, and in 1966, after several years of competition, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle and Lamar Hunt negotiated a merger agreement in which the two leagues would formally join together in 1970. In the 4 years until the merger, the AFL and NFL champions would play each other at the end of the season under the guise of an ultimate championship game called the AFL-NFL World Championship Game. The cumbersome name wouldn't last, however, and once again we have Lamar Hunt to thank for this. He suggested the naming of Super Bowl as a placeholder. However, both he and Rozelle thought a better title could be found, but sports writers ran with this new naming in advance of the inaugural game in January of 1967, and it has stuck ever since. The very first Super Bowl dates back to January 15th, 1967. In this Super Bowl, the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in what would become the first of many Super Bowls to follow. Though there was anticipation before the first Super Bowl between the Packers and the Chiefs, the game, which was held in the Los Angeles Coliseum, did not even sell out. Mostly due to the fact that people were not used to traveling to neutral site games, but also because the league was still very much in its infancy. Regardless, the Vince Lombardi-era Packers routed the Chiefs and ratified the notion of NFL superiority. The game drew 65 million television viewers, which at the time was the largest of any American sporting event. After the merger, the NFL split into the American Football Conference, or the AFC, and the National Football Conference, or the NFC, both under the umbrella of the National Football League, more well known as the NFL, with the winner of each one of these conferences playing each other in the Super Bowl. The 2-week gap between the conference championship and the Super Bowl allowed suspense to build as the media presence grew dramatically. And by 1974, the event had grown to such proportions that Norman Vincent Peale declared that if Christ were alive, he'd be at the Super Bowl. As the NFC's domination of the AFC produced a series of Super Bowl routes in the 1980s, Madison Avenue swooped in to create a different kind of interest in the game. In 1984, Apple commissioned a Ridley Scott-directed commercial promoting their new Macintosh computer. The ad, based on George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, showed a woman tossing a sledgehammer into a gigantic TV screen of Big Brother's propaganda. Shown during Super Bowl XVIII, the commercial started a revolution, and from that point forward, corporate America debuted its best ads during the game. After all, there's no better place to unveil them than before the biggest national television audience of the year. With the rise of TV, the internet, and other entertainment options, the country rarely pauses to watch or follow the same event. The Super Bowl is the one exception. Virtually the entire nation will be watching, with well over 100 million tuning in to produce a collective experience rare in today's compartmentalized entertainment culture. So there you have it, the brief history of the Super Bowl. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. If you want another great story, check out this one right here. And see you guys later. Cheers.